Good morning and welcome to testing on the back end and more. It's going to be like 1 hour of testing on the back end. It's pretty simple. Quick introduction, and then we move on to something else. We'll see what that is. Anyways, for testing the back end, we're going to see a couple of things. How can we test the endpoints? But there's a repository that we all call on. There's a model here. We also see, there's very little implemented on this model. We're still gonna write a test, or two maybe, to kind of implement one of these model classes, one of these model methods, right? And everything else in your backend, it's probably gonna be in that other layer, the business layer, and those are gonna be functions. Probably, if you're lucky, they're gonna be pure functions. So you could go back to day one and use the same techniques that we used there just to test out the functions. There's no need to know anything about server if they're just pure functions. But then for the routes though, if we go and look at this is a pretty, don't follow this, I got two routes. For testing route handlers like this, we're gonna use a little extra NPM package that's gonna help us make requests and do all that. And then for the model, I just wanna show you that you could flip the configuration from the development database that you're using to use a special testing database so that you could continuously wipe out that database while you run your tests. So we're not going to be writing unit tests for this. This is going to be, in the case of the model, it's going to be an end-to-end going all the way to the database. Oh, yeah, thank you. I see that everybody likes my light theme, but since I don't want you to get too comfortable with it, I'm going to go back and do the night owl theme. All right. So, question so far. Let me go yesterday. Any problem testing yesterday? Yesterday was very challenging because you had to work with legacy code. See, the first couple of days were nice because we were doing TDD, greenfield development. By the way, jargon, let's do some tech jargon today. What does that mean when I say greenfield or brownfield development? Has nothing to do with colors, but greenfield projects means that we're building it from scratch. So there's nothing there. It's like a green field. It's totally empty and you go build your stuff there. Brownfield development, though, is when you have to work with legacy code, with code that is actually in production, is being used. It's good code. This is why it's legacy code. It's good code. It works. But probably wasn't written with testing in mind. So it's a little harder to test. And it's also, since someone else wrote it, may have been you last week, someone else wrote that code. Unless the code is written in an easy to read manner, it may be a little harder to just kind of get started on understanding the code. So greenfield and brownfield. We prefer greenfield, but in reality, most of the time, you're going to be working with legacy code. So you're going to be in a brownfield project like yesterday, where you had to understand the code. By the way, there was a bug in there. I think no one has fixed it. There's a bug in there. You probably found it when you were running the test, something related to the locking and opening. And one of those things where had it flipped. Probably you wrote a test that confirmed that and you saw it and you fixed it. And if you didn't, you're now wondering like, I didn't see any bugs. There may have been a bug there unless another instructor fixed it, but it was there for purpose. I normally get PMs from students during this project like, I think this is backwards. And I'm like, shh, fix it. And shh, just fix it. All right. So let's write some tests for this. Well, first thing is, of course, we will probably have some pair programming going on today, but let me start by kind of talking a little bit, and then I'm going to bring someone else to help me talk. But for now, we have been working with Jest, and we always assume that we're running on the browser. So by default, Jest sets up an environment that has all the stuff from the, like window. You could do window dot, but that's a browser API. It doesn't exist in Node. In Node, it's called global. So probably the first thing that we want to do is want to tell, like if we go and take a look at the notes here, probably this is the first thing we want to do. We want to come in here like, boom. and say, the first thing I want to do is set the test environment to run in node mode instead of the browser mode. So again, we didn't have to do anything because we were using browser stuff. Now we're going to do that. There are a couple of ways of doing this. The first one, and this probably the simplest one, is going to your package.json. And in here, you can have a jest key. And then inside of that jest key, there is a lot of configurations that you can add to that object in here. One of those is called test environment. And the test environment, by default, it would be JS DOM, which is a kind of a JavaScript little module that will give you the DOM APIs for the browser. But we want to work in the node environment instead. That means that now I could do things like global, which is a node thing. It's the equivalent of window. And that's going to be supported now as part of our test. So doing this, when we run the test, we're not going to see any difference because, you know, we're just changing the environment. But this is going to let you use Node stuff instead of browser stuff. So that would be one way of doing it. Another way of doing it, and this one is useful, is there is a command that we can run with Jest to generate a jest.config.js file. So if you do, since I don't have Jest CLI installed globally, I'm going to do npx jest, and then a couple of dashes here in it. Not sure why isn't it like just init, like git init and everything else init, but this is dash init. Doing that, keep your eye here on the left. This is going to generate after I answer a few questions like, oh, it seems that you already have Jest configuration. Do you want to override it? Of course not. Don't override my configuration. So I answer no to the first one because we have some configuration that we want to keep on our package.json. Oh, I have a Jest configuration here. Is that what it's saying? I don't see any Jest configuration in there. I don't know what that was about. Do you? Oh, okay. It's talking about this Jest configuration because I added it here. Never mind. So in this case, yes, I want to override that. The following question: have Jest create a suitable configuration for your app? You like Jest running in test script or package.json? This is the one that I'm going to say no. I don't want you touching that. And here with the arrows, we have this option here, either node or JS DOM, right? So I'm gonna make sure that I have this on green, node, hit enter. And do you want just to add coverage reports? I'm gonna say no here for now. Clear mocks, no. And then we're good to go. Okay. So notice that the Jest configuration on package.json is not there anymore because now Jest knows that it's gonna work with this file instead. So again, this is a big file, but this is how Jest is going to know how it's going to be configured. Look at the one that we changed is called test environment, and he set it out to be node. There are a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff in here. So in the Jest documentation, there's very good documentation that says what all of those are about. Some of them I've never ever touched. But for instance, automock, that makes sense to you now because this would take any external dependency and just give you back a mock that has no implementation. You could turn that true if you want to do that for your test. So go take a look in there. Have fun. But for now, the only one that we care about for this is we want to have the test environment be node. So that's done. That's set up. Now, when we run Jest, again, we're not going to see any changes. If we go and run our npm run test, there's no magic, nothing weird happening. It's just going to run the test normally. So again, the process is, the reason it asked me a question is because I had the just config there in package.json, but now that it's not there, if you run it, npx jest -init. See, now it's not gonna ask you about overriding configuration because there's no configuration to override. It's just gonna be, do you wanna add this script? In the first one, I'm gonna say no, but then the rest should just show up. So enter. Do you want to add coverage? No. enter. Do you want to no? So basically it's enter, enter, enter after the first no. The only thing that I'm saying no to is I don't want you to touch my package.json. And there is a reason for that. I'll show you in a minute, in a few minutes. So give this a try. You should end up with this just.config that has line 132 uncommented to change the environment. Cool. All right, let's check out. So works. Does it work? Yes. No. Yes. Give it a try. But it's like it will. That is the first step. Now we're ready to write some tests. Almost. Okay, looks like everybody is good to go. I would like, this is not related to today's lecture, but notice that we start on index.js and we listen for connections in this file. But we separated out the server, right? We have been doing this and we told you separation and concerns and all that. But there is another reason for this. If you were to listen on this file, when you run tests, every time you require this file for the test, it's gonna try to run the server on that particular port. This is already something that's already fixed because we're not listening on the same file. We have it separated. So by you having it separated, you're not ever gonna run into that issue. But notice that if you have an index.js with everything in there, including the listening of the server, you will run into the problem with address in use. Because every time you run one of the test files that is important, that server is going to try to run it and spin up a server on the same port. So by having this separate, you avoid this altogether. So you're good to go. We're just going to export the server from this file, and there's no listening anywhere. There's no port information there. Just a quick note. Now, what are we going to use to run the test? And most importantly, what is it that I want to test? Well, some of the things that we can test are the routes, like the endpoints, right? And remember that we talked about this. A route is just like a function that takes some data and returns some kind of response. So we could check for that like a function. And then you have this business logic, validation, data, conversion, operations, all of that stuff. That is just regular JavaScript. You could just require that and test it as a regular function like day one. And then you have this data access layer. And this is going to talk to a persistent data store. In this case, those are going to be end-to-end tests. They're going to be a lot slower because they talk to the database. But we'll see an example or two of that today. So those are three things that you could test for your server. You could start there and then go from there as you need more. I'm hoping that most of the logic that matters in your application is going to be in this middle layer right here. This is the business layer. So this is probably where you're going to go test heavy. And this, again, it's going to be like day one. It's just import the functions that you want to test and test them out. So a lot of doing the most important part of your business, which is the core logic, you already know how to do. So let's talk about testing some endpoints. Well, if you were to test an endpoint manually, what would you do? Every time we wrote an endpoint, what did you do to go on? Anybody wants to have a conversation with me? Like someone talk to me so that we can have like this dialogue about this. And I like doing this because this is not an exciting topic to talk about, especially by yourself. So
yeah, it's not.
It's not, right?
What's
All
up?
right, thank you, Mr. Rogers. So if I wanted to test this endpoint, make sure that that this is returning to under okay and the server is returning this message. Normally, without any automated testing, what would you do?
Either Postman or Insomnia to run it.
Exactly. And then what would you do in Postman or Insomnia?
I would do the get request for it. and I would make sure it's passing the 200 back to me.
Exactly. So you make a request to the endpoint that you want to test, and then you look at what you got. You look at the response. So there's a library that we can use for that, and it's called listen to this name. It's a nice name, Super Test. So this Super Test library is like nothing out of this world. It's like Superman made it. So we're gonna do an npm I of Super Test. And it's going to be a dev dependencies just for testing. So npm I super test, and this is kind of a REST client that we can use to make requests. But then it also has assertions that we can use. So it's pretty nice. The documentation for it should be on npm.js. If you go npm.js, it's not the best documentation in the world, so I'm not even going to tell you, read the documentation. You do want to read the documentation, but for now, just follow along with the examples. But here's the link. What did I do? I went to npm.js.org and then just did a search for supertest, and this is the documentation. So you can do some assertions just by using the library. Some simple assertions are easy to do with supertest without even using Jest. It's just gonna work out of the box. For instance, if I wanted to make sure that this is returning into 100, I'll give it a try. So npm test. I think this is already wired and it's running. Very nice. My tests are running. Do I have? Yeah, I have a server spec.js, and then we're gonna have that server file here, maybe on the right. And let's go write an expectation here. The first thing we want to do, Mr. Roger, is what? Probably bring in the
require.
Yeah, we need our server because we're gonna be testing our server. So that would be that /server.js. And then now that we have that, it's a good idea to have a describe here. This is about the server. And when you're testing a server or a router or something, it's also nice to kind of break it down into even more describes, so that I could say something like, I'm going to be testing the get to slash. And now this my display is going to tell me, and this is for the get to slash endpoint. So the first one that we're going to check is returns. Let's write it. Just it. And this would be returns response with 200, the OK, HTTP status code. And with super test, oh man, look at this. I'm gonna come in here now and say, bring me super test as, from super test. And we could do this a couple of ways. If you want, on every test, you could just use the library right there. So we could say, hey, if we were making a call, say, hey, super test, using my server, right? With this server, I want to do a get request to slash. Okay, that works. Is that intuitive? Does that make sense to you? Like, hey, I'm going to use super test with my server to do a get request to here. Comments? Yeah. No. Now, if I make a request to a server, that's going to be an asynchronous operation that is going to return what? What does it return? I see a question there. Is there a way to undo a just init? What do you mean? Delete the file and run it again. That's it. If it's, I'm not sure what. Like change the configuration, you could change it in the file, just delete the just.config.js file and run just init again, and it will work. So I know that I stopped saying on the list of every day saying this is the project for today for clone and install dependencies, but when I say like, you know the drill, I'm assuming that you're gonna fork a clone it and npmi or jar to install all the dependencies. And if you did that, you should have that dependency because it's part of the package.json. So if you're seeing that you don't have any of the dependencies there, that means that you did not download the dependencies from the repository after forking and cloning it. If you did that and it's still not there, do it again. Maybe there was a network problem. Sometimes, you know, npm. sometimes. All right. So again, this is going to return what, Mr. Rogers? A call to an endpoint. What does it return?
My response.
Maybe. But before it does that, this is an asynchronous call that returns what?
Don't use the, it's a wait.
It's a promise.
Yeah.
Every time you hit an endpoint, it returns a promise. If you were making a call with Axios, you would say Axios.get and then the browse, right? If this is a promise, we need to use the browse here. Then you will get a response. And when you're there, you do that. And then of course, if you want, you could run your cache in there. But in this case, I don't want to catch anything because this is a test. And if something fails, I want my test to fail. So I'm just gonna use that then. That's it. By the way, that then is a method now that we're using on super tests. There are other ways of checking for this. Like I could do something simple like this, for instance. I could do this. And this is without jest or anything. I could say expect. And this expect function from super test, this is not the just expect, all right? This is the one from super test. Has a few signatures to it. And by signatures, I mean, you know what a signature is on a function? More tech jargon, signature.
Don't have a clue.
That's right, because it's a new term, of course. So a signature, that makes no sense. A signature is the arguments that you have, including their types, depending on the language. In the case of JavaScript, is the arguments that you're getting there. So one of the signatures could be, you call expect, passing it a number, and it's gonna assume that you're looking for the status code. So if we do this, and we save, our test runs, and it's telling me that it works. So it passed, right? So, but we want to see it fail. So let's do this. Let's return 500 from our server. And if I save it, what should happen is, but this should fail, right? So when we do that, and what happened, Mr. Rogers? It didn't work.
You didn't change the, hold on, let me change my view. All right, you changed.
Yeah, I changed my endpoint to return 500, but my test is like none the wiser.
Because your endpoint's supposed to return the 200 on a get, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's returning a 500 and still passing. This is a very, I'm sorry, what?
Can you rerun the test?
Yep. There you go. Still passing. In fact, it doesn't really matter what I do here. I mean, I could do 300 and still gonna pass. The reason that it's passing is because it's not really giving me feedback for my actual endpoint. And here's an introduction to working with asynchronous stuff when using Jest. By default, what's going on is that Jest is trying to run this synchronously. So it is executing this call. But the thing is that it's getting to this point right here and not waiting for the response. So it doesn't know that this came back with a 300. So by the time that comes back, the test is already done. So in fact, this is the same as not having anything in here. Like if I save that, I still get a passing test because this is what Jest is seeing. It gets to the end of the function and says, yeah, no assertions have failed, so I'm good to go. Okay, that's not what we want. So when working with asynchronous code in Jest, this is a Jest problem. In Jest, yeah, we need to tell Jest that this is going to be an asynchronous thing. And you can do that in 3 ways. We're gonna see 2 of them, and I'm gonna mention the 3rd one, right? So the first and the easiest by far is all you have to do is return the promise to Jest. So instead of just making the call, you could return that call. And then what happens is that when Jest runs that test, sees the response type, and says, oh, this is a promise, I'm gonna wait. until I get the result back, and then I'm going to run the expectations. So by doing that, just returning the promise, this is a very common mistake, right? This is why we want to see the test fail. If we would have written the test, it's such a simple test. Yeah, I'm expecting 200, and I have 200 here. There's no reason for me to see it fail. This is a good reason to see it fail. You have to make sure that your test can fail. Otherwise, you may get false positives. So now this is telling me, yeah, you wanted 200, but we got 300. So what do you want? Well, let's go fix our endpoint now, make it pass. Now we implement it with the right code, and that works. So that is the first, right? Whenever you're doing a HTTP request, this is why I like to talk about asynchronous testing instead of the day two. I like to talk about it here because this makes it a little more real to you. Why are we doing this return thing? Another way, go ahead.
In the training kit, they showed us to use async function.
That's right. So another way of testing asynchronous operations like this, let's say that I want to make sure that I'm getting JSON back, which is another something else that you could do with this. I could say another of the signatures of this expect method will take something like content type. So properties of the metadata of the request content type. And then I could say something like, and let's do a regular expression, otherwise we're gonna run into the problems that maybe it's not exactly JSON, but we just wanna know that it contains JSON. And if we save that, we're getting a passing text. Let's make sure that it fails. If I do this and say, I'm looking for XML, it should tell me, yep, no XML in there. So it's good because all we have was content type. We were looking this, but we have application JSON instead. So let's fix the test, JSON, right? So expect takes metadata, a key value that you could check for the properties of the response. Now, instead of returning this, I'm gonna make this function async. And this is also signaling, yes, hey, this is gonna be an asynchronous test. So in this case, let's go try without a wait first. If you use it, it should, all right? But just knows that I wanna wait for this because it's an asynchronous test, just by having this async again. Now, can this fail though? Let's see. I mean, every time we use async, we should be using an await, so can this test fail? And the answer is no, because every time you use an async, you wanna use await. Save that. And now we should get that test failing. We know that it can fail. Let's go and make it now so that it checks the right thing. There we go. So I want to stop here, give everyone a chance to go and write those couple of tests. So you have an example. This is async. Synchronous test. Need to either return the promise or use the squad, async and await, right? Here we go. So please try it out. Make sure that you change either the code or the test here to make sure that it can fail and then make a pass by testing the right thing. And tell me if it works. I'll mention third way in a minute. So again, if you did not run npmi, after cloning your repository, you need to run npmi so that you download all the dependencies like SQLite 3, Express, all of those, you need to have them there. Every time you clone a repository that has dependencies, you need to run npmi or yarn. That should be like automatic for you at this point. Only so the last couple of days I haven't told you those explicitly because I want to get you into the habit of doing it. Oh, I wish there was like a command that would just do that. Like grab my repository and it will just clone it and go into the repository, run npmi and all that. Like one command. That's it. Oh, someone else was having an error related to I cannot find SQLite 3. It may be that. It may be that hasn't installed the dependencies yet. Oh, you did run in PMI? That's a problem then. That's definitely something else. Hmm. Now that is odd. Any errors on running in PMI? Maybe there was an error installing SQLite 3 due to your version of Node or something. Let's see it. I stopped my share so you can share to see if we can spot what the problem is. Remember that we have a man down there, Eagle Eyes there. So Vijay is like, what about me? What about me? I can also see. Um, all right. Let's do npmi first. Make sure that we're not getting any weird error installing this. That is, in fact, a very strange error. What? Show me, show me the changes that you have made. You see what it says on the left? It says that you have 3 changes on your Git widget there. On the left, all the way top, you know, where you see with dot 3, that number 3 and a blue circle there on the left, your Git changes, click that. So show me that. Okay, that's new. Package log, that's new. Server, spec. Those are the only changes that we have. Show me that. Server. I have no idea what's going on with that code there. No idea. Yeah, it's no. What version of Node are you using? I don't know. Maybe there's something with a version of Node. Yes, that looks fine. Show me the version of Node that you're running in on the terminal. What version of Node.js are you using? I wonder if that's it. Just do node space dash v, not npm, no npm, don't need it. 6.9. Oh wow! I wonder if that SQLite 3 version is having problems with that version of Node. Do you have NVM installed? Did you run into any problems before with SQLite 3? Because this should have failed on the database week though, not here.
Yeah, I've installed npmi multiple times, and
No, that's fine. What I'm wondering is if there is a problem with that version of Node.js because it's really old. 6.9, we're like in 12 right now. So so I wonder if, so my question is, were you using this same version of Node with all the other package and was it still working?
yes,
The database week.
yeah.
I don't know why it's breaking for the test only. That's so strange. Don't know what to tell you. Shouldn't be happening. I mean, all the packages are there. The only thing that may be strange is maybe if we upgrade that version of Node, how do you install this? Is this Windows or?
This is a Mac.
Yeah, are you using Homebrew
Um,
or NVM?
I mean, I think I installed Homebrew a long time ago. I'm not sure if I'm like actually utilizing it.
Let's do a brew doctor. Just type brew space doctor. I think it is installed. Okay, so let's do brew update. I think you have to wait for this to finish.
Oh.
Just Control C because it's just going to tell you there are some problems in there. So brew update first.
Come on.
Oh, let me look at Slack. Maybe someone ran into that problem also.
Does it seem like an
Oh, look at that. David is using 6.9 and he's also running the pen separately works. Sometimes it doesn't. Yarn, delete, node.
seems to be happening there.
But if someone has the same version of Node, let's do Node-V to make sure that that's actually your version of Node. I think this is still working. Control C again, one more.
Just kind
One
of
more.
frozen.
Come on, let it go. All right, that works. Trash can. I'm not doing it again, yeah. Oh, you're in 11. Yeah, that was the NPN version that you're looking at. Yeah, good call. So that shouldn't be it. Try an npm I SQLite 3 to see if there was something broken with the installation and it's just still there. Only thing I don't know, maybe there was a hiccup on the network when downloading and the folder got corrupted for the installation. I have no idea, really.
Okay. Yeah.
If that doesn't work, we're just gonna kind of break everything. Just remove the whole thing. Oh, there it goes. Oh man. So something broke during the installation of SQLite 3. Good to go. Yeah, nasty. How can we protect against that? I don't know, but thanks everybody suggesting just run on BMI. That should work. Good job. All right. So besides that error, I think I have one more person still working on this. Let's see. There's an error with an image in there. Make sure that you have your describe and then followed by a callback function, and the code goes inside of that callback function. If that wasn't fixed. Any other errors still lingering? Let's see, any other errors? Any more errors? All right. In case, since we had that snafu with SQLite 3, let me drop you the code in here so you can catch up quickly. This is the code for the test that we wrote so far, so that you're on the same page with us. Now, the third way is, even though we have not used it yet, Jest will give, not that, this one. Jest is gonna give our function here an argument called done. And we can use this to do checks like this. But in this case though, so we do need to use the .then method from supertest instead of using just expect. And the idea here is you could, well, I think, I don't remember if I could pass the done function here. But in this case, what we're gonna do probably is something like, we're gonna do a then, a get, and then in here, we would handle the response and do our expectation there. And then we need to tell Jess when we're done. And we do it by calling this function. So here we can say, well, we have that response. And inside of that response, we have the response that comes back, and we have all those objects that we expect. Like if I want to check in this case for the status code, I could say expect, and now this is the expectation from Jest, not the expect from the library. The function from the library is that then, and then in here, we're going to say expect that the res.status, and we could do expect 200 too, the res.status to be 200. Okay, now we did the check, but then again, let's make it say I'm expecting for a 500. Save that, and we have this done function from Jess, right? But notice that we're not using it though. Okay, so we expected 500, and we got 200. Supertest that get then res. Oh yeah, never mind, because we're using it here on the that then it's actually waiting because of this. I wonder if I could fake it somehow. Maybe do the expect 200 instead. Let's do that. Let's see if that breaks this the way that I expect. Expect 500. Come on, finish. Here you go. All right, so supertest server that get expect 500. Okay, so you're using done, and it's telling me this is an async callback, but was not invoked, right? So since we are looking at this done and grabbing it, just is like, you have to call it. You have to let me know when you're done. When do you want me to run that expectation? So here I just say done. to signal just when we are ready to do the expectation. And this is how it knows, right? And it is using done, but it's still not doing what I expect it to be. Oh man, how can I fake this? Yes, get expect. I don't remember how to fake this thing to make it force it when using super test. Should have been with it then. Okay, let's see. Then less. You could see that I don't use this a lot, right? If I check for 500, I think this is gonna work. I think because because super test is smart enough, and this is not a regular den from the promise. It should, yeah. This still works because this .den comes from super test. I would have to do like an example with a regular promise that is not calling .den from super test. So this is not a good example of using done. I would say try the example that's on training kit that is not using super test. It's just a regular promise coming back, because this is breaking it because of this. Super test is smart enough to wait. So I'm gonna remove this so it's not confusing. Follow the one on training kit that's using, like I said, timeout or something to work with the done operator. Okay, cool. So far we've tested just the endpoints, and we could check other things, right? We have REST status. We could check for the body, like make sure that you, let's write another one here that says response with API off. Okay. So if you're testing for the shape of something, in this case, we could say, and the expect has a signature where you could check for the body, but then you have to check for the whole body. Sometimes you don't want to check for the whole body, only like a property or something. So in that case, instead of using expect, I prefer to use that then again and go into the assertions with the just expect. So in this case, I could say expect res.body, and you have access to all of the other properties like the body. You could see the headers and all that. In this case, it's that body. Can I do this? Would that work? I mean, the server is returning API up, and the answer is no. It's not going to work because we should be using the to equal instead. Like so. Now, it's supposed to be working. Let's see if it's really working. It should tell me now that it failed with the wrong value, and now I'm good, right? I want it up and I got down, and let's go fix it again. Okay, so again, asynchronous code. You return the promise, you use async and await for the calls, or you use if you're hitting something with a regular promise, again, this is not gonna work here because this .then is actually coming from super test. So this is smart enough to wait and then do the expectation. So a good example of done is not gonna work in here. And then with the don't callback. Most of the time though, I personally like this one. I just return the promise and let Jess handle it, okay? If your code base is full of async and await and everybody's using async and await everywhere, probably this is the way to go. But most code bases rely on promises because they're better supported still than async and await. So I would say return the promise and you're good to go. The rule of thumb is always make sure that your test fails. Otherwise, you, especially with asynchronous code, you may get false positives, as we saw on the first example. Right? If you want, go write this test. Let me know when you're done, and then we go from there. Do I want to use the try catch on with the async and await? Not in the test. If I get any errors, I want the test to fail, so I'm not going to catch it with a try catch. If you do that, then you would have to throw the error, so there's no point of catching it just to throw it. So when testing, no try catch. Yeah, I wasn't sure if I could pass the done function here as the second argument or not. Not sure. So I didn't want to try it. So Seth said that it does take, you can pass the done function here as the second argument. Good, thank you. Good job. Let me grab the code and keep it in here. Oh, 200. Now that I know it fails. API up, API up. Request. This is not passing for me. So you're using request. Oh, that's why. Yeah, I wasn't. Following the examples on TrainKit. Thank you. So yeah, this is what I wasn't sure. Like, I don't remember if we could pass the second function here as part of the expect. So now we have confirmation. Thank you very much. That you could just pass it as the second argument and it will work. Gonna add that to the demos now. Again, make sure that you're, whatever you called he called his request instead of calling it super test like we did. All right, looks like everybody's good to go. So it's a good time probably to take a 5-minute break. And then when we come back, let's go and test the model and see if we do something else after that. Yeah. So see you in 5. Go do some push-ups, Mr. Rogers. We're back. We are back. So let's talk about testing the model. And in order to do that, first, let me show you some wiring that we have in there to support this. So we have a database. This database is hobbits.db3. This is where we're getting the data, right? So if we went and hit localhost, I think it's 5,000 / hobbits. But we need the server to be running, of course. So let's go and start the server, because this is running, but only for the test. So npm server. Do we have a server script in here? Oh, npm run server. Npm run server. I think we do. Yep, 5,000. All right, confirmed. So let's go and hit this, and we get an empty object. Shows there's no data coming back at all. What? It's not right. Let's see. Let's try. Yeah, API up / hobbits. Oh, come on, really? Do we have that implemented yet? Let's try it out. Let's see. In our server / hobbits that get all, and then we're sending hobbits. Oh, there is a bug there. Oh, look at that. There was a bug in there. That was not intentional though. This is what we should be getting. Here we go. There was a bug in there. That was not intentional. Okay, so we have 4 records in here in this database. But let me show you, right? The database that we are using is determined by the DB configuration file. So what we are doing is we're bringing in the next file, and we're grabbing as our environment. We're reading from this environment variable called db_env. And if we don't have that defined, then we're going to be using development. That's the idea. Now, when we run, keep that in mind, right? When we run npm run server, all we're doing is calling node1, and that's it. So our environment should be, since we don't have anything defined for that variable on the environment, it should be development by default. So it's running against this database right here. Okay? Because if you go and check the next file now, we have a couple of configurations now. We have one for development and one for testing. They're separate configuration files, objects. So the development object is reading from the hobbits.db3. And that's fine. But if you're running tests and you want to do end-to-end and exercise the database, and you want to test the reads and test inserts, most of the time you don't want to be doing that against your development database. You want your development database to be a little more stable than that. So instead, we have another database in here that we're using for testing. It's called testdb3. And this is the one that we could just thrash as we need it. But in order to hit this database, though, we will need to change this DB configuration file to grab the testing database instead. So let's do that. I'm going to do it manually here, right? Just remember that we have 2 configurations. One, the testing configuration, points to the test database, and the development is the regular for the hobbits. So I'm going to change this and say, if I don't have that environment, I want to use testing instead. Save that. Server restarts. And now we should be hitting the testing database instead on the same endpoint. Let's try it out. And this one is empty. So our test database happens to be empty. The development database has some data in there that we don't want to touch while we're doing our test. Questions there? So again, we want our server to always default to using development, but for testing only, I need to find a way that only for testing to exercise the testing environment instead. So change this value. So let's write a test for that. I'm going to copy this and go into our server and say something like, well, actually, let's go and write for our hobbits. On the hobbits model aspect in here, let's do it just describe. Do we have a tribute that want to work with me and try to write this test? I want to check that this is pointing to testing when running the tests. Can someone help me write this thing? So this is what I want to check. I want to check that on my environment variables, I have this db that thing that is pointing to testing. That's what I want to check. Oh, yeah, 3. Let's go. Let's go.
Hey, Louis. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Okay, so we are going to be testing. Okay, I think that will be a pretty easy one. Let me just see. Okay, yeah, we write the test case now.
Mm-hmm.
Testing the environment to be testing.
Mm-hmm.
And we are going to get the environment from process.env.db_env. So we can say expect of process of process.env, yeah, to be testing.
So if this passes, that means that when our tests, even though our server is configured to looking at the development database, this would mean that when we run tests, Jest is not using the development database. It's using our testing database. That's what we want, right? So it passes. Why is that? Well, because our dbconfig, which is the one that determines which configuration are we using for everything related to connects, is saying, if you don't have this defined in your environment, then I'm going to use development. But if you do have it, I'm going to use it. And then when we pull the configuration out of the file, out of the connects file, right here, we're grabbing it by using brackets notation, passing it the string that we have. So if we have testing, it will grab the testing configuration. And if we have development, it will grab the development configuration. Simple JavaScript, right? So how is it that we were able, any ideas of how can we change the environment so that we can set this development thing, this variable in our environment? Any way to do that you might remember from before?
Yeah, we can do one thing in our package.json. When we run the scripts, maybe we can set the dbnv.
Yeah, you could do that, of course. But I think here's the problem. If you're using anything other than Windows, basically,
Mm-hmm.
there's a syntax for that. There's a way of doing that on all of the Linux, Mac, and all the other Nix's operating systems. But Windows does it differently. So you would need to kind of somehow in the package.json figure out, okay, so if am I running on Windows, and if I am, here's the command. And if you're on other operating system that is not Windows, this is the command.
Okay, I think that's why Brandon got the cross environment error, cross-env. So yeah. I mean, I would think that's the solution to the problem.
That's right. So what we did is we're using this little package right here that says, I'm gonna do that for you. Just tell me what the environment you want to set is, and I'll do the rest. So this cross.env package does that for you. It's already installed. It's part of it's one of the dependencies, right? Well, you're using it for testing, so this is why it's a dev dependency. So if we go to npm.js again and search for this, you'll see cross.env from a Utah native called Kenzie Dots. You may have heard of him. Look at 1.3 weekly downloads. This is something that a lot of people run into because they need that. And here's the example, right? So let me drop this on Slack. So all this does is it's gonna let you, through your package.json, by using cross.env, before you run your stuff, it's gonna let you set your environments. Okay. Like in this case, it's doing node_env sending it to production, then running webpack and the rest. In our case, we are saying when we run the test script, only for this script, I'm gonna set the db_environment to be testing. And then I run my command, just.watch, as normal. Okay, questions there? what's important that you understand, that everybody understands how this is all coming together. This puts something on the environment, and then this file right here reads it from that environment there.
Luis, I have a question. Before you showed us about using the just config.js, right? So how will that be related to this? In the sense, how will we use it in conjunction with this? In case if you're going to have the DB environment set from there, how do we use it? Because right now everything goes from package.json and the next file, right? So if you're going to use just.config.js, how will we incorporate it into our system here?
This is used for jest. This is for configure jest itself. This has nothing to do. This has nothing to do with the Connects configuration, which is what we're using this for. What we're using this file for is to be able to switch the jest is testing. This is what database am I going to be connecting to? And we want to be able to switch that dynamically, even if we're not using jest. For any, maybe we have something where we want to run a script that says, on this script, run against the testing database. With this other script, run the server against the production database, which is something that we may end up doing in a minute.
Okay. So even if I delete the just.config.js, because we have the just configured in the package.json, it will work fine. Is that the right understanding?
Yes, because this has not, even if you're using another framework for doing your testing altogether, this right here determines which database connection am I going to use. This is an application thing. Only that we took advantage of that for running the test and in combination with the package.json.
Perfect. Got it. Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about just environmental variables? Like, I'm a little bit confused as to how they work.
This would I could, but I don't think we have enough time to cover it. But we did cover that on day 4 of week 1. So I would say later on, to understand it better, I think you could probably just do a quick rewatch of the portion of that video that when we cover it. But basically, and this is going to be a very high level, so you might not get all the benefit from it. But normally what happens is every computer has, where the application is running, it's going to have some kind of environment surrounding the application. And in this case would be things like, in our case, this would be like this value that determines a name that we're giving for a particular environment. We're using it for the database. We're using it to read a configuration object. It's just a string, right? You're just saving a string. We're using that in order to grab the right configuration. So this is on my computer though, when I run it. But if we were to deploy this to another computer, maybe to deploy to Heroku, Heroku can have a totally different value for the same configuration key. So if you think of this as a variable that is tied and that you can define in per equipment, per configuration instead of per file, that would mean that I could have a set of variables here, these names, and have different values from these names than the servers on Heroku are going to have. So
yeah, that helps. That helps a lot. I mean, I just want to, just theoretically knowing that it's operating outside and we're not like looking at a file, but it's an environment that's around. I mean, just conceptually, so I'm not, kind of staring at these things and going like, well, where is this data coming from? Because when you say like the data's, like when you go to that other file and you, the test, and you're saying like, oh, we're checking against the process.env. I mean, my initial thought is like, okay, well, where is this coming from? And now that you say that it's like universal, it's kind of like a global variable, like it makes more sense.
Yeah.
No, you can even have it in .env file, right? Is that what it is?
Yes, that's what we did on those videos. This is why that's what I meant when like
that part I understand, but in this video, like it felt like, or in this explanation, that's not what we're doing, and so it's something a little bit different, and so that's why I needed the clarification. But
yeah, cool. Yeah, I just want to make sure that you know that I can really.
No, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
A really high level that there's no way to go into detail the many ways of changing this. But that's what we're doing. We're taking advantage of. Someone is going to put that on the environment. In our case, it was just a script. So we're just doing it from here. We say, hey, Cross-Env, I want you to put this thing on my process.env. And the value is going to be testing. And you could pass more than one value too. So it's fine.
Awesome.
So now that we know this, we know that we're always executing against our test database, and this is how it works. Just trying to kind of conceptualize it in your head. This is how we get doing that trick. So as a way of, okay, so I could change the target database dynamically by using an environment variable. So that means that I can run my test knowing that I'm not going to be damaging my development database ever, because this is always, and this is, it's a good test to have, because as long as this is, if you ever come here and someone comes here and says, no, and change this to something else, or maybe they provide a different environment, you want to know that you're not longer hitting the testing database. So I'm going to keep this test there, because this is going to deal with tests against the database. So one of the things that we have in there, of course, we know that the get works, so we're going to try to look at one of the other ones. So let's take a look at this one, the insert. So let's go and try, this is async, so I don't want this to be confusing, so I'm going to get rid of that async thing. Just make it, okay, there's going to be this insert, and we're going to implement that, but first we're going to write a test for it. So let's write a test. And this would be like, should insert, or insert should work, or something like that. So
yeah, we write the test case. Oh, Luis,
yeah,
do you want me to stay on, or?
Anybody else wants to try it out? Because I don't want to monopolize you all day. Anybody else? Volunteers? I just need someone to talk to, because it's without someone to talk to. All right, it's you and me. So we'll be testing the insert method for the model, right?
Yep. So we write the test case.
Mm-hmm.
And then
what can we do to test this?
So we can one thing is we can make it a async function. Will that be okay? Async await. Okay.
We can. I want to keep it outside of that, so just gonna return whatever it is that you want to do.
Okay.
I mean, we could do it async await, but there may be. Let's do it async await, just to. So by doing async, for everybody on the video, if we're using async, that means that every time I need to make any call that is gonna be asynchronous or returns a promise, anything that's asynchronous, if I want to wait for that result and capture, I need to put a wait in front of it. So you'll see me using it in a minute.
Yeah, one question, Luis, do we have to have it at the test case level? The async function, should it be for the
it's got, yeah, you're right. It's got to be here. Good job. It's actually for the test, not for the describe.
Okay. So we say await, and before that we might have to call the model in. We might have to get the model in.
Yes, because we're gonna test it, right? So we should bring it up here. Let's grab the insert from the Hobbits model. Okay, so now we have that insert there.
Okay, so we say await insert, and we need to pass the object to it.
And this just needs a name, so I'm going to give it a name.
Yeah, just it's a name. Okay.
Matt. I just saw Matt there on Slack. I just grabbed a name that I see on Slack right away. All right, so we insert it.
Okay, we inserted it, and next we will have to retrieve it maybe back from the DB to check if it has been inserted. So we can do at this point in time, I would understand that the database is empty. Okay, so because we already are getting the information from the database. Oh no, we already have something in the database, right?
Not on the testing database. The testing database.
Okay. Okay, it was the other database. So then we would do we would query the database to give us back the. We would do a get. We would call a get on the model to get the records from the database. So that will be const hobbits is equal to this should also be a okay, or db not db. Yeah, we can either do the get on the model, or we can directly go to the db config and get the thing from the database directly.
What do you prefer? What if we didn't have the get all implemented yet, and we're still trying to just test the insert, so we can't really depend on that being in the model? What if that's broken, and we're
Then
testing?
definitely I'll get it directly from the db.
Yeah, so let's go and do that instead. Let's go and grab it. So we need to bring in the DB from, and this is, get out of there. Where's the DB at? Is it data or database? So we get out, data, db.config. So data.db config.js. And now we can use that to make a call directly ourselves.
Yeah, so db of hobbits. Yeah.
That's the name of the table.
Okay.
And
it's easy. Yeah. Next is you say expect. Expect hobbits. And it is going to return me an array that I know. But how do I check dot? Okay, to have length. Okay, to have length of 1. Yeah.
This may or may not work, and we may fail for the wrong reasons because of the whole async thing, right? We're saying we're doing this async,
okay,
checking this, and yeah, that's not what we expected because this is now a promise. So if we're gonna capture the result of this, always remember to put this await here.
Okay.
Otherwise, this would be the promise object itself, not the data that we expect. So save that. This test look a lot cleaner when we use an async and await. Just need to remember to put that away in there. And this is what we're getting. We expected that we had 1, but we're getting 0. So the test is failing.
Because it's not implemented in the model.
So let's go make it pass.
Okay.
Let's go and implement this. What can we do here?
We are just going to call the insert on the db hobbits dot insert, and we pass hobbit.
And of course, we always want to foolproof this by having this. And then, of course, this will just return the collection of IDs. That's fine if that's what we want. But let's say that we wanted to implement this in such a way that we return, instead of just the IDs, we return the actual hobbit that was inserted.
Then we can instead of returning this, we just need to dot then db of hobbits.
Okay.
Or
so
select.
Instead, I know that we're gonna get the IDs, right?
Yeah.
Like this, and then in here we're gonna return db hobbits. That where we have done this before, right? Passing the ID. It's gonna be IDs, but the first argument of that, and then we call first on it, so that we return that. Let's see if that fixes our test. And it seems to be working, right? Works fine. Excellent. So what happens if I do this? If I say, actually, I'm going to have another one with Jonathan. And now I'm going to say, I want to make sure that I'm getting 2 back. And this may be surprising for you. What's going on? I mean, we're inserting 2. Why are we getting 3 back?
Is it because we already inserted 1 and we try to run it again and we have okay?
Can everybody see that? every time we run the test, we're adding, right? So we had the first mat that was inserted there, but then we have mat again the second time we run the test. This is not gonna work. So we need to find a way to clean that table if we want this test to be helpful, right? So this is a good point to introduce a few other jest globals that we can use. And these globals we can use at the file level, like all the way up there, but they are gonna be scoped inside of their describe. Like in this case, I'm working with the describes related to the Hobbit model. So this is a good place to place those functions, right? Those functions are before all. We also have one called before each, and then after all, and after each. And those are functions provided by Jest that we can do to execute some code before all of the tests, or to execute some code before each test. Like in this case, what would be useful? How do you want to do this?
What is the difference between before all and before each? Sorry.
Before all runs before all of the tests. It runs once and then runs all of the tests for this particular describe.
For this particular, I think before all should be okay, right?
Right. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna clear the database. Let's try it out. Let's see. I don't know. Maybe. And then the before all takes a function that is the code that you want to execute. So let's say that we have an async function here. The reason we're going to make it async is because, again, we're going to be doing changes to the database. So we want to be able to do await and tell Jess, hey, you need to wait until this is done and then go and run your test.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to use await here.
And we do a truncate?
Aha, exactly.
Okay.
And then we say dv hobbits, and we want to clean it up. Truncate. Delete will work in this case because we're not using the IDs for anything. But truncate is the way to go because that clears the database really fast too. It's faster than a delete.
This is what we used in the migrations also, right?
Yes, that's what we use in the migration and the seeding when we're doing seeding.
Yeah, seeding.
Not migrations. Yeah.
Seeding.
So this passed. Apparently it passed. Let's make sure that this is passing, right? So let's do this. Actually, I could just change this to say, well, what if I expect to have one only? Let's try it. Let's see. Again, well, what do you mean? Okay, so this is looking good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before we ran all the tests, this is looking perfect. Now let's introduce another test though. Right here. And what this other test is going to do is instead of just saying, yeah, I know that I got 2. Oh, look at this. Okay, I got 2. Okay, run it again.
Oh, I think I know what you're doing, Luis. Yeah, now it will fail. Yeah, we need before each now because we have multiple test cases.
Exactly, right? So even if we make both tests should pass, no problem. But every time we run them, now we have even more and more and more. Eventually, now we have 4 instead of only 2. So this should probably be in the before each, right? So let's complete this and say insert should insert hobbits, right? This is saying it's going to insert some hobbits, but this one is going to make sure that it's actually inserting the provided hobbits. So in this case, I want to say, yeah, I know that it worked, and I know that the length was fine. It tells me that something got inserted, but how do I know that it was Matt that got inserted? How do I know that my model is actually inserting the right data, grabbing the right information?
Okay, so now we check for the name of. Okay. Yeah, we expect. After that, we do a expect.
Okay.
Expect and hobbits. It's going to be an array.
Maybe we could do this. Maybe I could say const inserted.
Okay, then it gets easier. Now inserted dot name to be Matt.
Okay, it could be Matt, or we could say const Hobbit equals, hey Matt, you're now a Hobbit. I just realized that. I didn't know you were. It's like, don't go, you know, that long-lived thing in the weed. Anyways, so a Hobbit name Matt, and then I'm gonna insert the Hobbit here. And now instead of just hardcoding this, I could say I want to make sure this is my Hobbit dot name. Like, it makes me feel a little better if we do this. Okay. So the first time you run it, remember the first time we run it, because now I could say, what if I want to do this? I want to say let inserted be this, and then after we insert this, like this is Matt, we're not using these hobbits anymore. So we could say, okay, I insert a hobbit, and then I check that hobbit was Matt, right? Let's do it this way, because this is now gonna get a little more. Okay, let's call it Matt. Let's make it differently. Let's do this. Let Hobbit be Matt, and do this, right? So those three basically go together. I call it, and then I do the expectation. But then we're gonna copy this again and do it one more time. And say the Hobbit is this.
We can't redeclare the same Hobbit, right? So we might have to have some other.
Yeah. So we're gonna create another one, and this is gonna be Jonathan. Let's call it John, like Jon Snow. And let's say that I do that, right? And I insert that. This is the inserted, and I'm gonna expect that the new value for inserted, again, we need to do this. So the new value for inserted is going to be the new value for Hobbit. So basically I'm inserting two separate ones and doing the same check again. Make sure that this is working, just to make sure that Matt was not there on the database. So insert the Hobbit. This is the Hobbit. Insert it. And again, this is all working because I haven't really made. Let me see if I can make a change or something here. It says, where's my model? It's my model here. We haven't really done anything like return undefined. Let me see if I could force this to fail the way that I wanted to fail. No, I need another test. But again, as we add more tests, like if I added another testing here that exercise this, we'll see that, yeah, we're actually continue to insert. Like the database right now has Matt and, oh, wait a minute. Let me try this. Let's insert Sam. We got a Hobbit in there, and then Frodo. Let's see if I could get this thing to not reject. Insert. No, I would have to write another test. But
Luis?
Yep.
Sorry, I have a question. Sometimes we also have SQL constraints, right? Like not adding the same name and unique constraint and a null constraint and all that. Is it possible to check those constraints as well using the GIS framework?
You shouldn't try to test them, but let me see what the migration said. If the migration has a unique name, like if we add a unique constraint here, the test is gonna fail because the code is going to fail. Okay. But you don't really need to test for, is the database doing the right thing because someone else did that, right? So by having the definition here, any error, this is why I said I don't want to have a try catch, because I don't want to catch the errors, because any error executing the code is gonna just fail the test and give you an error, including constraints. The constraints, if you try to violate a constraint, is gonna just give you an error and fail the test. So this will work. So again, I rather have this, like as you continue to add, like if add a new test that we also insert in data, you will find that this is going to break quickly because this is running once only, and you want this to run on every test. So before you run this test, it's going to clear the database. Before you run this, before you run that, inside of this describe. This is the way that we want it. That way we guarantee that what happened before, when we run one test first, we just keep it too. We run one. What is this? I think we have a key that it says. We run one test, and then we run the other, and it should still continue to work as we add more tests. Save that. Continue to works. There we go. Let me try this with it before all. See if that breaks it. Okay. It didn't. It got cleaned out. That's good. Okay. Fine. Just do it on the before each, right? Because how will you guarantee that it's always cleaned out before every test? Let's see. Can you test a delete? How would you go about testing a delete? Manually.
We add a record and then we delete it and see if it's gone away from the database.
Exactly. And the logic is going to be similar to this. We're not going to write it because it's basically the same. But the point is that you could do things like this, right? Like you could test, you could say, I'm gonna declare this, I'm gonna insert it, grab the value. This is because we're doing async and wait. If not, this would be nested inside the dens. And then once I have my response, I could run assertions again that. So again, you could go back and say, okay, now I'm gonna go and grab the hobbits, make sure that it's empty. I go and insert one, make sure that I inserted one. And then I call my delete, and then I go and check again that it's empty by doing something similar to this to have length. Like there versus 0 is empty, insert, now I have one, now I delete, and now I don't have anything. Because remember that we're clearing the database, we will have to make sure that each test is doing everything that it needs to do in order to test the operation. You cannot rely on, oh yeah, I inserted a record before, I could just go and delete it. No, your test has to make sure that it's empty, that it inserts one, it's there, now let's delete it, it's not there anymore. And you could do that. In this case, it would probably be good enough just to do the quantity, just check the length of the array.
Okay.
All right, so let's see if people's following along. Can insert. Unfortunately, since we're using SQLite 3, we're going to get this warning, but this warning is not a problem. This is just telling you you don't need the returning. You always get the ID anyways. But this is important when we move to using Postgres. So ignore this and continue doing your inserts, passing the second argument for the ID.
Sure.
If you're getting a constraint on the ID, that means that you're passing an ID. All you need to pass is the names. Don't pass IDs. And it looks like you're passing like the same ID. Error with the environment. What's the error? Let's see if we can figure it out. TDD underscore web testing, just watch. I wonder if it's a problem with the installation again. You try installing Cross-Env manually, maybe something happened with it and it didn't get installed when you did npmi. Make sure that you have this Cross-Env installed. Let's do a share just in case. Sounds like a nasty problem. Well, it says that it is installed, so okay, show me on the left there, show me the changes that you have so far. Click on that Git thing underneath the magnifying glass all the way to the left from the top where it has the number 7, yeah. So we have changed just package.json. Click on the package.json. Let's see what changed there. Only an empty line. That shouldn't have been a problem at all. So cross track. It looks fine.
I was having the same problem. I deleted the cross environment and then re-added it back. The cross environment maybe to watch. Yeah, I deleted it and added back and it worked.
Up here,
Let's try that. Yeah.
just like literally delete this line.
Well, just control. I say I control X maybe.
Oh.
No, you have to close because that's the that's the diffing. So close that tab and go into the actual package.json tab.
Okay.
Now this is gonna be a weird thing if that works.
Weird. All right. Well, it was a weird
thing. There's no way that I would try that. I wasn't even going to try that. So yeah.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Rogers.
Wow. All right. So your question may be, what was the problem there? And my answer to that is, I don't know. So from now on, whenever I run into something like that, I would just re-add the line to the package.json. Is that SQLite constraint? If you're not passing an ID, is that still going on? Still the error? Or no? What? No, let's see it. Maybe we just delete something and add it again. No. Very strange. You don't need to be running the server to test it, so you can stop that just to save resources on your computer. That's not gonna make any difference.
Why wouldn't you need to run the server?
Yeah,
I think you need to do a before each instead of before all.
yeah, but it's talking about an insert. Let's look at the implementation of the insert. Hobbit,
Okay.
ID, then IDs.
Line 21.
But it's not passing an ID. Insert it, name to be hobbit.name. Oh, but you're doing two. You're doing two inserts, right?
She's using const.
Yeah, but it's doing two inserts. You really want to do Hobbit is going to have the inserted value inserted should be a get. So instead of doing another insert, instead you want to do db Hobbit, you know, like grab the actual Hobbit. Well, I don't understand what's
And 22.
Now, on line 21, her const is passing the await insert when she doesn't have to do that. She could just do let
Yeah.
Hobbit equal the name.
Yep. Yep. So
And then she does the
object.
insert.
No, the object.
No,
The object.
just get the object back. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the inserted is going to be the result of calling the insert. But still, I don't know why we have why would that create a problem with the ID? That is very strange. Yeah, that's it. But I don't know. See, that's some of the things like, why would that, like the error that's coming back is not really helpful at all. Why would that talk about IDs when it's really just because she was doing two inserts? So again, I don't know. I don't know. Thing is though, that if the tests are failing, there's something somewhere, at least we have that alert, right? Once we have the test written the right way and the code is doing what it's supposed to do, the test should pass, right? Okay, so we have about 10 minutes to go. This is basically here, what we want to take from today is how do I test my endpoints? We use super test and we make a request and then we inspect what we get back and that will test everything. This is an end-to-end, it's very kind of very broad testing. If you have any middlewares in the process, it doesn't matter. Everything is going to get tested because what matters at the end of the day for the user, and some people call this end-to-end, some people call this acceptance testing. But the point is that those tests are going to be slow because they go all the way to the database, but it's also testing the way the system, the way that it tests that the user is going to experience it. So I pass this data by calling the endpoint and I inspect the response. This is going to test everything in between. It's going to test your router code, your middlewares, it's going to test your data access code, all get tested by testing it through the endpoint. But if you only want to test the data access layer, then you can do what we're doing here. If you want to test only your logic that has nothing to do with the database or with the request, then you have a regular JavaScript file like the day one. and then you export those functions and you test them using regular, like pure function testing, unit testing, like we did before. So now you have a way to test all the layers, from the very broad test everything to I want to test only the data layer, or I want to test only the logic layer. And they all kind of revolve about these techniques. Now, the next one, though, is what if I had a requirement that says, yeah, this system needs to be on the web. And now, since you're using SQLite, if you go to production with SQLite, you're going to run into issues when deploying to places where the file system gets wiped. Heroku happens to be one of those. So the first thing we need to do is find a way to set a production here, environment, that uses a client related to Postgres. Like there is a library called PG, just another driver. So let's go ahead and install this. If it's not installed, I don't know. So npm IPG. Even if it was, I don't trust it anymore. Well, the errors that we seen today. So now the next one would be, how do I connect to the database? And the connection to the database could be an object like we are doing right here, but it could also be a string. And this is what we call a connection string. And Heroku will give you a connection string. So you could read that connection string from somewhere. So let's say that this is our, let's call it DB connection, okay? And after that, you could, of course, set up the migrations, the seeding, and all that. So let's copy the ones that we have there so we can use the same migrations and seeding. But the key here is my connection. Again, my connection could be an object or a connection string. So let's go back up here and say, I'm going to define my connection here, const db connection. This is going to be a string coming from Heroku. This is probably going to be different depending on what you're using, but for our case, well, we want to have this connection be from Heroku. So what we're switching now, we could probably get rid of the testing now. We're switching out of the testing mode and say, how can I put this on Heroku and switch to use this package instead, using Postgres, and connect to a Postgres database? What would that entail? Because you're going into build weeks. The reason we don't do this in the first week when we talk about deployment or after databases is because now you're going to have it kind of fresh in your head as you go next week into your build weeks or labs. So the first thing is we need a key here for the configuration that's going to point to production. And this is going to need a connection. And this connection is going to come from, let me close all of the development and testing. It's going to come from Heroku. So let's go back, let's go into Heroku and see it, right? You don't need to follow along with me. It's fine. I'm going to give you the code, right? This is, I want you to understand the concepts here because a lot of moving parts are going to come into play. So it's important that we kind of stay focused on understanding how everything is coming together instead of trying to follow along. So on Heroku, if I had an application that is pointing to my server, so let's go and create this create new app real quick. This is for testing Hobbits. Yay, it's available, created that app. And I want this app, we're gonna deploy it from GitHub, of course, but I want this app to have a database. So let's connect it to GitHub. This would be web testing for, yeah, the guided, this one right here, I think it is. Here we go. From the master, enable automatic deploys. And we're gonna deploy this branch in a minute. So here it is. Now that I have my app, how can I add a database to it? Turns out that we go into the resources, there is this add-ons portion of the screen. And if we type Postgres here, there is a Heroku Postgres service, and they have a nice free tier that we can use. So you could use the hobby dev in your app, provision that, right? And now this is attached as a database to our application, to the Luis Hobbits application. Pretty simple. Once we have that there, If you go into the settings, remember that inside the settings, there's risk reveal config bars. And look at that. There's a database URL, environment variable, added automatically by Postgres. And this always points to your database. You would think, well, maybe I could just copy this connection. Yeah, but don't copy the connection because this changes. Heroku is going to change that every once in a while for security reasons. So if anybody steals this, they're just going to have limited access to your database because that's going to change. The username, the password, everything changes. So the only way that you could get to that is by using this environment variable within your application, database underscore URL. Okay. So if we go back to our code here, we have this DB connection, and we know now where we can find it, right? Any idea what I can type here in order to get access while in production? Because remember, we're only using this connection when we go to production, when we deploy to Heroku. How can I find the connection string for this? Yes, yes. So process.env dot database URL. It has to be named this way because that is the variable that Heroku is going to add for this. You don't want to change that. You want to use this. Very good. So that's it. Just by having this, I am now able to connect to that database, which is awesome. Pretty awesome. Okay. Let's try it out, right? Like if I save that and let's do I like to have like, I don't know if that breaks it still, but I remember that back then when I was trying this, you needed kind of a placeholder object for this to be in place of this. Like if I don't have this, what can I use? Well, and I provided a placeholder object. I want to try it without that because that would simplify the code quite a bit. So let's try it out. Before I can do anything, we would need to go and commit this and say, complete solution, almost. Save that. We have all of our changes now. We installed that Postgres package, I think. So it should be on our package.json on the dependencies right there. We're not, I don't remember if you're using Cross-Env. No, non-mons over there, those are fine. So I think we're good to go. We have our npm start, executing index. Let's try it out. Let's do a git push, origin master. So in theory, this should now be kicking up in a minute. It's gonna kick up our deployment after this makes it to GitHub. Should be there. Guided. Here we go. And the build is in progress. Hopefully we don't break anything. If it breaks, I'm just gonna go back and do that update on the db.config, just to, connects.config, just to have something like a placeholder for the production. Hopefully not needed. Here we go, printing dependencies, and yeah, man, finish. You can do it. It's deployed. The server is fine. It's the data that we're worried about, though. If we go to Hobbits, do we have data? Look at that. We have data. But this is a lie, though. This is a lie. Why is this a lie?
Will the seeds also be run in case if we had it deployed that way?
Kayla is like, wait a minute. This is suspiciously the same data that we had on the development database, isn't it? But we just created a brand new empty database on Heroku, and we're still seeing the same data. So yeah, I don't think we're using the right thing, are we? Let's see how. So my question would be, what database environment, what database are we targeting? So there is a file that shows us that, right? You remember that? There's a file that decides which environment we're going to use from here. And it seems to still be using development. So let's go check this file. It's called db.config, right? And see what's going on there. Well, this is saying I'm looking for this environment in order to decide which of these keys I'm picking. Oh. But since when we deploy to Heroku, we don't have this. I'm always using development, even on Heroku. So how can I make sure that Heroku finds this thing, this db_environment, and that this has a value of, what value should it have in order to use our connection to Heroku? Yeah, this should be equal to production, but how can I set it up so that Heroku sees it? Yes, we need to go to Heroku, right? And say, hey, Heroku, by the way, I have these settings. I have this config environment that I need you to set so that my application can use it. And the value of that would be production. And again, this production here is because we want our connects file, the configuration file, we want to read this production right here. So if we call this Postgres, we want to call this Postgres. But then keep it as production because that is the default. When you go into production, you want to have this called production. A lot of packages just assume that this is going to be called production. So now that we made that change on Heroku, right? We added this DB environment. We click add here, and now we have this DB environment in production. So my application running on Heroku is going to see production. It's going to go and read that value from the connects, and it's going to get this back. And this is the one that uses the DB connection that is pointing to the database URL. That means that we're almost there. We're almost done, right? So if we go and refresh, instead of seeing this data, we shouldn't have any data. But the problem is that we have this error now. It's like, there's no data, but there's also no table in there because this is a totally empty database. So if you want to have a table inside of a database, you have to run it. And you could do it manually, right? There is a way that there are tools that you could use to connect and manually run that. But is there another way that we can generate tables in our database? That it's cooler because we could just use JavaScript for it. We could use migrations, right? So our problem with this error is we now know that we are not, this is talking about relations. So this is Postgres now telling me I can't find that table. Basically, that's what it's saying. So let's, brother's like, migrations, yeah. So migrations, so that means that I need to run my migrations, but I need to run the migrations on, not here, but on Heroku. Locally, Heroku has a CLI that we can use, right? So there is a, if I do npx Heroku, there is a CLI from Heroku. It's going to take a while, right? But it's going to give me a whole bunch of commands. Some of those commands are going to be useful for other things, but in our case, we're really interested on this thing that says run. You see that command right there? It says run. And you can run a one-off process is inside of your Heroku application. So let's try that. If I do Heroku run, what would be the command that you, if you were sitting at the terminal on your server on Heroku, what would be the command that you would use to run the migrations? Yeah, migrate latest. Exactly. Since we already have our npx running Heroku and all that, on there, all you have to do is say, this is the command that I want, migrate latest. Here's the thing though. When you run the migrate latest on Heroku, Heroku is gonna need to know, yeah, you have, like if I go now into my dashboard on Heroku, you'll see that I have more than one application. Like if we go into personal, there's more than one app. So Heroku needs to know, all right, Luis, you wanna run this command against which application? Like in my case, it's called Luis Hobbits. So we need to tell Heroku which application to target. And the way that you do that is by passing this -a flag with the name of your application. So Luis Hobbits. Let me drop this command in here. Let's see if I can copy this and paste it. So this is a command that I'm running, right? I'm saying npx, I want to run the Heroku CLI, execute the run command, and passing migrate latest, connects migrate later, and the application that I'm targeting is Luis Hobbits. If you do this the first time, it's going to ask you for your credentials, of course. But if you have connected from the terminal before to Heroku, it will just execute the code. In my case, I already connected, so it saves the credentials. If you run that against one of your app, it's going to ask you for your username and password the first time. And this is saying now that it ran migrations on my application. And since my application is connected to that database, in theory, we shouldn't get that error anymore. We should get an empty database query because there is no data there. And we are back to the most beautiful shape that we have seen on the internet, our square brackets. Now, is there any brave soul here that will be willing to talk me through executing my seeds on Heroku? Anybody? Tribute? I want to execute my seeds. I want to have some data in there. I want to see my hobbits.
Shouldn't it be connect seeds and then run?
I don't know. You tell me. Let's do this. Walk me through it.
Crap, you just had that Heroku little thing on there.
So npx Heroku, right?
Yeah, because you use npx. So npx Heroku run connect seed. Or is it seeds?
It's seed.
Seed, and then run. Then you should tell it which one you want to run to. So let's try that little anchor tag thing. The dash with A.
-a, yeah.
And then Luis Hobbits.
Yes. So if we run that, it should run our seeds. So it's supposed to be connecting and doing the thing, and there you go. And I want you to notice, you see, Heroku is running the production. It's using the production connection. So this is running against the Postgres, against this database right here. So if we go back and we refresh now, we have hobbits. But we know that these hobbits, though, are coming from the Postgres database now, not from our SQLite database. So whether we want to do this on Heroku, well, if you decide to deploy your project to Heroku and you're using SQLite 3, the thing is that Heroku every once in a while wipes out all the hard drives. And since SQLite is like just a regular file on your hard drive, it's going to get wiped out. Postgres, on the other hand, is a database that is independent of your application. So they can wipe out your hard drive as many times as they want for your application, but the data lives somewhere else that is persistent. So for your labs project or your build project, please take this as an example, this code that I'm going to give you, the zip file, and make sure that you configure your application to have, right, if you go into the application, the only extra thing that you add on Heroku after adding the database, again, from resources, add-ons, look for Postgres, just add it, pick the free one and you're good to go. The second thing that we're going to do is in the reveal config bars, whatever name you have for your environment on the db.config, that's the stuff that you want to add here, and point that to your production. Then in your code, you just need to have a production that uses a Postgres driver. This is the one that's very well supported. There is another one called PostgreSQL. So pick a driver that works nicely with connects, and then just make this little change here on the db config so that you grab that db connection provided by Heroku instead of using your own object here. Oh, the command for the seats, yep, it's similar to that, only that we're gonna use seat row instead. Wait a minute. There you go. On this, in the notes here, what I'm gonna do, because I know there are quite a few, I mean, you're gonna have the code, but the commands, I'm gonna drop those here. So before I drop the zip for you, I'm gonna kind of outline the steps here for you, including the couple of commands. Cool. Real walkthrough. So, code test. The project for today is gonna be, it's your last project. Like, we don't wanna have too much, right? We give you not only a lot of guidance, but I don't wanna give you a lot of grief. So you're gonna have some flexibility today. The project, it's pretty simple, but then it's not simple. It's just saying, use Jest and Supertest, create and delete a resource of your choosing, whatever you want to do. Pick a resource. Maybe you want to, you know, save Tintin Adventures. I don't know. Whatever it is, pick any resource, add a create and a delete. At least 2 tests for each route handler. And you know, you could test for the status code and you could test for the type of the response using content type. You could test the shape. You could test how many records you're getting, all of that. And also, if you want to test for your database models, if you use that, and it would be nice if you did it in a TDD way. So you write your test before writing your route handlers. Okay? And that's it. Pretty simple. But at least we want to see, since you're doing 2 endpoints, at least four tests. But if you go into models and stuff and you want to do database access, your call, you don't have to. But if you do, then maybe you're going to have a lot more. Okay? So this is your goodbye. For the sprint challenge tomorrow, you will only be testing backend. You did testing on 2 projects for React already, did testing 1 day for JavaScript functions. So today and tomorrow is only testing backend. So you kind of cover the whole 3 parts. There's no deployment here because this is not about deployment. This deployment is to see that we kind of go over time always. This deployment is a little bit extra because I wanted to make sure that you had that right before you go into using it for your project. So it's been great. Good luck on the sprint challenge tomorrow. Good luck on build weeks. Good luck on labs if you're going that way. Good luck if you're going into the PM team. I hope to see you as a PM if you so we could work together. It's been great, and I love all the feedback that we've gotten for you. You are developers now. Keep my contact and reach out if you run into problems in the build. I know there is a process for builds and build weeks and labs, right? You have to, there's like this escalation policy, and eventually this gets to a document. But as soon as you get to that document, if you see that there's no way if you get any help, please reach out. Like if you have questions, architecture, whatever, we're always here. Like your journey does not stop when you leave Lambda. You stay with us in the Slack channel, so please stay in touch. I want to know where you go because believe it or not, what fuels us here is the stories of people when they go like, yeah, I never made more like $60,000 in my life, and now I'm making this, or I saw a video yesterday that was kind of, wow. There's this student, some blogger or YouTube channel guy followed a student like secretly through the process in Lambda, and then he kind of talked about the thing, and the guy just started working, and it was funny because one of the things that he found that were weird is like he got up and went to his supervisor and said, I need to use the bathroom. And the guy's like, why are you telling me to just get up and go use the bathroom? Because he was used to other kinds of jobs where people are always looking at you and making sure that you're doing your stuff. You're sitting at your desk and you have to take breaks at certain times. And it's so hopefully you run into that video at some point. But seeing those stories, like students like that, the way that he used to live and the way that he's now, the stuff that he can do now, that's what fuels us. So please stay in touch. Make sure that you come into the higher channel when you get your offer and drop it there, get that vibe going. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Luis.
Love you. See you in Slack.
Thanks, Luis.